Hi, I'm Becky Streepy from Glue and Glitter, and today we are going to make crispy tofu in the oven. This recipe is based on my crispy air-fried tofu. It's a very popular recipe on my website, but I know not everyone has an air fryer, and just because you don't have one doesn't mean you should be deprived of crispy tofu that you don't have to deep fry. So I did some testing and I figured out how to convert that air fryer recipe to an oven recipe. You want your tofu pretty dry because that is how it's going to get nice and extra crispy. If you have a lot of liquid, it's going to come out during the cooking and you're going to end up with like a softer, soggier result. So there is no marinating in this recipe. All of the flavor comes from the seasoned cornstarch coating. So this recipe is kind of a jumping off point. I'm seasoning the cornstarch just with garlic powder, salt, and black pepper. You are welcome to mix up your seasonings. Use a little cayenne if you want it very spicy. You can add ginger, you can add Italian seasoning. Kind of mix and match your flavors so that you can turn this into the crispy baked tofu of your dreams. The other way that you can customize this recipe is by mixing up the oil that you use to coat it. Yes, this recipe uses oil. No, you should not yell at me about it. I cook with oil. Oil makes things crispy and delicious, and it does that in this tofu recipe. If you absolutely will not do oil, you can use a sticky sauce like barbecue sauce or teriyaki sauce to get your cornstarch mixture to stick. Your results will not be as crispy, but they'll still be delicious. So back to the oil. The recipe on my website calls for olive oil, but you can also use strongly flavored oils like a toasted sesame oil or a truffle oil, and that'll bring a whole other flavor dimension to the dish. So to start making your crispy tofu, the first thing you're going to do is toss your tofu cubes in olive oil. The olive oil is going to help the tofu get crispy. It's also going to help the cornstarch mixture to stick to the tofu. So you want to make sure you get a nice even coating. Gently stir. Take your time. There's no rush here. Definitely stir gently because if you do like a vigorous quick mix, you're going to crumble a lot of your tofu. You want to keep those cubes intact. Once you've tossed it in the oil, the next thing you'll do is dump on that seasoned cornstarch mixture. And remember, this is where your seasoning is all coming from. So do another slow, gentle stir to get the tofu cubes evenly coated in the mixture. You want all the sides coated of these cubes. After you get a nice coating, you just turn the whole bowl out onto your baking sheet. And then, very important, move the cubes around so that none of them are touching each other or overlapping at all. If they're touching, then where they're touching, you're going to have a mushy result. And if they're stacked, same thing. So space them out. There's plenty of room on a baking sheet for a block of tofu. If you're doubling this recipe, you might want to get a second baking sheet involved. It's worth it for the results that you'll get. So once you have your tofu spaced out on the baking sheet, you're ready to toss that pan into the oven and bake. You would think that I would be telling you next that you have to flip the tofu cubes halfway through baking, but you do not have to do that. Because you're only lining the baking sheet with a thin piece of parchment paper, there's plenty of heat coming up from the baking sheet itself to get that tofu nice and crispy. You do not have to flip. If you are using something thicker, like a silicone baking mat, like a Silpat, in that case, you will want to turn the tofu. Because the Silpat is thicker, you're not going to get as much heat coming through and the bottoms of your cubes aren't going to get as crispy. You can also skip it with a Silpat and just say it's okay to have one side that's not as crispy as the other 5 sides, but that's totally up to you. So I think that's pretty much everything you need to know. Let's cut to the overhead so you can see how to make this. And of course, if you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. I would be happy to help.